Speaker, sir, I beg to move. This group of amendments covers two subjects. First, the operation of competencies returning from this country from the European Union which intersect with devolved competencies under the three devolution settlements. And secondly, the Lord's Amendment on Northern Ireland and the Belfast Agreement. If I can turn first to the matters applying to devolution. In its original form, the bill, in what was then Clause 11, provided for all those powers to be held initially at Westminster and transferred to devolved level only when agreement had been reached on an appropriate UK-wide framework to protect and preserve the UK single market and respect our international obligations. And the key charge against the old clause, Mr. Speaker, was that it was not right to hold otherwise devolved powers returning from the EU in Westminster by default. I'll give way to honourable gentleman.
Well, gentlemen, not ashamed and embarrassed and appalled that we have 15 minutes to discuss these critical devolution issues, amendments that were designed in the House of Lords, and we that are direct elected members have not had the opportunity to debate them. Isn't he ashamed of himself?
No, Mr. Speaker, I think that the government allowed perfectly adequate time for debate on these issues, and as the honourable gentleman knows, on the devolution matters, these questions in great detail are ones that have been discussed between myself, my ministers and my officials, and the Welsh and Scottish governments and legislatures for many months. And as I would hope to explain, Mr. Speaker, the government has made very substantial compromises in order to address precisely the concerns that were raised by both Scotland and Wales, and I am pleased that the Welsh government has accepted the merits of the compromise that we put forward and come to that agreement. Now, Mr. Speaker, we listen carefully to the contributions made here, to those made in the House of Lords, to the views of the devolved governments and legislatures, and to the concerns of business and other stakeholders, particularly those in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The revised approach that we worked on with the Scottish and Welsh governments means that by default all decision-making powers returning from the EU that intersect with devolved competence will pass directly to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast unless we take explicit steps to preserve temporarily an existing EU framework. Of the 150 areas of policy returning from Brussels which intersect with devolved competences, the great majority will now go straight to the devolved level. Some of those will require a non-legislative framework like a memorandum of understanding. In only 24 out of 153 areas of policy do we think a legislative framework would be needed, and where we may need to consider a temporary freeze of current arrangements exercised at EU level which have been accepted by the devolved governments in Scotland and Wales for many, many years, and we would do so in order to give certainty and clarity for businesses. We have also addressed the criticisms that were made that the effect of the old Clause 11, now Clause 15, might be indefinite, despite our clear intention that the arrangements should be temporary. And, Mr. Speaker, that matter has been firmly put to bed. We are subjecting the powers that we seek in this bill to a sunset provision, meaning that the freezing regulations can only be made for up to 2 years after exit day, following which that power to make regulations will lapse altogether. And regulations made under this power may only last for a maximum of up to 5 years, and we hope that in most cases we will be able to get agreement on a long-term future UK framework to protect the United Kingdom's internal market, and therefore the freezing power can be ended much sooner than the 5-year maximum period. We have buttressed these amendments. I'll give way to the gentleman.
I'm grateful to the Minister to give way. Does he not agree with me that there perhaps would be more confidence in this government's approach if you'd managed to bring your amendment to this House before it went to the other place?
I mean, the purpose of a parliamentary process is that you examine in detail. This, I think, in respect of these, in respect of these clauses, the House of Lords has done its job as a constructive revising chamber, and I certainly had very, very good conversations with members of the House of Lords from the Labour and Liberal Democrat parties and from the crossbenchers, as well as those from my own party. And we have continued, as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, the very detailed conversations with not just the Welsh Government that has agreed, but with the Scottish Government, which I do want to put on record, though we've not been able to reach final agreement, has engaged for many months in a very constructive fashion, and many of the detailed changes embodied in this group of amendments, Mr. Speaker, actually reflect things which the Scottish Government, as well as the Welsh Government, sought from us. We have, sir, alongside the amendments, designed, working with the devolved governments, a comprehensive intergovernmental agreement. This makes it clear that the UK Government will always seek agreement from the devolved governments and should act by agreement wherever possible. In response to the request from both Wales and Scotland, we've underpinned that principle with a commitment that we will not normally ask the UK Parliament to approve regulations to preserve existing frameworks without devolved consent for those regulations. Can I give way to the Plaid Cymru representative, please?
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to him for giving way. But isn't it the case that he's placing legal constraints on the Government of Wales and Scotland and only political constraints on the Westminster Government?
Well, it is simply not possible by legislation to constrain Parliament of the UK, as Parliament is sovereign. But I would say to the honourable gentleman, although I know his party in the Welsh Assembly opposed the compromise that was on offer, I was very pleased to see that the Labour government in Wales and the Liberal Democrat Party in Wales were prepared to accept what I thought was a reasonable compromise and to vote in favour of a legislative consent motion and to commit themselves to repeal the Welsh Government's continuity bill at the earliest possible occasion. Now, the Scottish and Welsh Governments have also been clear that we should not try to use these regulations as a mechanism to avoid seeking legislative consent when creating future frameworks. And we agree, and we've spelled that out in terms in the agreement. They asked us for a guarantee we would not legislate for England, where devolved powers to legislate for their respective nations were frozen, and we have put that into the agreement as well. And that's why I do not accept the case that has been put forward by the Scottish Government for withholding consent to these proposals. Give way to right honourable.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State. Will he not acknowledge that when we passed the Scotland Act 1998, and the right honourable member was a member of Parliament at that time, the Scotland Act is very specific as to what are reserved matters. We cannot get away from the fact that what this government is doing is legislating on matters that are devolved. This is a paragraph. Will the Secretary of State today commit not to legislate without a legislative consent motion from the Scottish Parliament on behalf of the Scottish people?
Mr. Speaker, I think not only do the agreements that we reached with the Welsh Government and embodied in these amendments respect the devolution settlement, and indeed Welsh ministers have said very firmly that they do believe that devolution is fully respected, but I think that we have complied in full with our obligations under the Sewell Convention. And I would say to the right honourable gentleman that he should look again at the statement by Mr Mike Russell, the Minister for UK Negotiations on Scotland's place in Europe with the Scottish Government, who described the situation we are in as a novel situation and said that in normal times such a bill would follow a normal timetable, but these are not normal times. And I think it is the Scottish Government itself that is saying that we are not in a normal situation here. Give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way at a time when President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, the most difficult of partners, can show that an agreement can be reached? Is it not telling that the only person that cannot reach an agreement is Nicola Sturgeon, because all they care about is grievance and independence?
I think my honourable friend puts his finger on the truth here, and it is of course a great disappointment that the Labour Party in the Scottish Parliament, despite their protestations of unionism, on this occasion decided to ally itself with the Scottish Nationalists. I give the right to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Can he confirm that the 119 powers coming to the Scottish Parliament and the 24 powers being reserved are exactly what people in Scotland want? It strengthens devolution but maintains Scotland in the United Kingdom. And does he also agree that perhaps if Holyrood had more than 25 hours of debate versus the 252 hours of debate here, we could have reached an agreement and we wouldn't be here today?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for reminding the House that we should bear in mind, when listening to the criticisms of the allocation of time here, that it is sometimes a question of people living in a glass house flinging rocks around themselves. I would say to him too that, of course, Scottish business has been very clear that we need UK-wide frameworks to protect a single UK market that brings great benefits to both Scottish business and Scottish consumers. And it is only a few weeks since the Scottish Retail Consortium, the Scottish Food and Drink Federation and Scottish Bakers said in terms in public that the maintenance of United Kingdom-wide frameworks on such matters as food standards and food labelling was something that was of vital importance to the future well-being of their member companies and the customers whom they serve. Give way to the honourable member.
I'm very grateful to the Minister. Whilst the government MPs and the SNP fight over flags, I would rather fight for my constituents. So can the Minister tell the House when I will be able to debate this particular clause on behalf of my constituents, because this elected House has had no time to either debate that clause or the very important issues in Northern Ireland and in Wales.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, whom I suspect does not share the views of the Labour Party at Holyrood on this particular matter, that he should address his concerns and criticisms to his own front bench. I thought, frankly, it was their decision to divide, but it was frankly approaching the ridiculous for us to have had 3 separate divisions on the question of whether the word necessary should replace the word appropriate in a particular clause of the bill. It was open to the opposition to have accepted a single vote, grouping those 3 resolutions saying the same thing together. They chose not to. That has used up a significant amount of our time. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have ensured that no existing power will be taken from devolved institutions, and we've provided for there to be a significant increase in the decision-making powers of the devolved administrations after exit. But in doing so, we've also made sure we don't compromise on those important common approaches we have to safeguard our single market, manage our common resources and allow us to be an open and competitive trading nation as we develop new arrangements to replace the EU frameworks. Sir, if I... Yes, give way to the lady.
Will the Minister accept that the programme motion that was passed earlier today has led to the ridiculous situation where these important amendments, including amendments on the Irish border, are to be debated in such a short period of time, and his is the only voice that it looks like it will be heard?
I mean, there is a balance, Mr. Speaker, between my giving way and frequently and allowing more time for others to speak. And I repeat to the honourable lady that it was the choice of her front bench to have 11 or 12 different divisions, in a number of cases duplicating in one division what had already been determined in another. Now, if I may, Mr. Speaker, I will turn to Lord's Amendment 25 on the Northern Ireland border. The amendment, in many ways, as a number of noble Lords noted, is a statement of government policy, and it was prompted very eloquently in the Lords by my noble friend Lord Patten. It seeks to ensure that we would not act incompatibly with the Northern Ireland Act 1998, and that we would have due regard to the joint report of December last year. The Lords' amendment sought to protect North-South cooperation between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and to prevent, among other things, physical infrastructure on the border with Ireland. Give way to the right honourable gentleman first, so I'll come to the honourable lady.
I'm thankful to the Minister for giving way, and can I welcome the decision that's been made to tidy up the jurisdictional and sovereignty issues which were put forward in the House of Lords in the Patten Amendment. And can I also ask him to confirm that this bill is restricted purely, the powers in it, and the amendment is restricted purely to the purposes of this particular bill?
I can confirm that the right honourable gentleman's interpretation of the government amendment in you is exactly as he has described. Give way to the honourable lady.
I'm very grateful indeed to the Minister for allowing me to intervene, and thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister will be well aware that in Northern Ireland there is considerable concern that we should have no hard border. The Government has repeatedly confirmed its commitment that there should be no hard border. However, that commitment, and I do not doubt the bona fides of the Honourable Gentleman, Right Honourable Gentleman, however, it appears to be contradicted on the ground by decisions by the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, who has, in recent weeks, asked for additional funding for up to 400 additional police officers for operational duties along the border post-Brexit, and has also significantly withdrawn 3 unused border police stations. Now, what do you think he is doing? Is he preparing for a hard border or not?
I mean, that's, as the honourable lady knows, ministers in the United Kingdom government have no power to direct or even give guidance to the Chief Constable of the PSNI or the Policing Board of Northern Ireland. I mean, what I can say to her is that the government could not have been clearer about our commitment to ensuring no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. That was a key element of the joint report agreed last December, and it is a commitment that the Prime Minister described in her Mansion House speech as a fundamental underlying principle of our approach to our negotiations with the European Union. Now, in the House of Lords, we set out that we agreed with the spirit and intent of Lord Patten's amendment, but it wasn't drafted in a legally appropriate way. So what we have done is to bring forward a number of amendments to try to tidy up the Patten Amendment and ensure that it is in a fit form that I hope will command consensus in the House. So it reflects the reality that the withdrawal agreement...
Under the order of the House agreed earlier today, I must now put the questions on the second group of amendments. The question is that amendments A to E to Lord's Amendment 25 be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their Amendment 25 as amended. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. We come now to the remaining Lords' amendments in the second group. The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their remaining amendments in the second group as listed on the selection paper and in the programme motion. Numbers 15 to 20, 15 to 17, 26 to 31, 46, 48 to 50, 54 to 101, 108, 109, 111, 114, 120, 129, 135, 141, 151, 153, 155, 162, 165, 169, and 173 to 196. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No! Division, clear the lobby.